A queen's greatest fear is not death, it is replacement. And in the case of Queen Isolde, she wasn't just replaced. She was erased, slowly, cruelly, and by the very person she loved the most. Her own blood sister. Once the crowned queen of the northern kingdom of Veldenreich, Isolde had the face of grace and the mind of strategy. She was chosen not just for her beauty, but for her brilliance. Her marriage to King Aldrich was a union of power, forged in diplomacy and sealed in admiration, but admiration turns to obsession, and obsession turns twisted. Because when her younger sister Leora arrived at court, wearing innocence like perfume and curiosity like silk, everything changed. The arrival of the flame Leora had not seen the palace since she was a child. She had lived in the countryside, far from royal whispers, but when their father died of a sudden fever, Isolde called her to court. She's family, Isolde said. She deserves safety. But what Leora found wasn't safety. It was a stage, a throne room that turned heads, a king whose eyes lingered just a little too long. At first, Isolde smiled. She dressed her sister in fine gowns, introduced her to nobility, taught her court etiquette, but as weeks passed, she noticed Aldrich's habits changing. He laughed more when Leora entered. He offered her rare wines. And once, Isolde saw him brushing a loose curl from Leora's cheek. That night, the queen broke a mirror. Not out of rage, but because her reflection felt like a lie. The garden of betrayal. That was a rose garden behind the east wing. Isolde had once told Aldrich it was her favorite place, private, peaceful. One morning, she went there unannounced, and there they were, Aldrich Leora sitting on the stone bench, knees touching, Leora laughing like a child, Aldrich staring like a man who had forgotten who he was. He did not flinch when Isolde appeared. He stood, kissed her hand, then returned to the bench as if she were a guest, not his wife. We were just talking, Leora said, her voice trembling, but the queen saw no fear in her eyes. Only calculation. From queen to ghost. In the days that followed, Aldrich became distant. Meetings were held without Isolde. Royal announcements no longer bore her seal. Her private chambers were reassigned for repairs. She moved into the queen's old music room, took over the queen's favorite harp. Wore the queen's perfume. Palace maids whispered, courtiers averted their gaze. But the worst came when Aldrich invited Isolde to a banquet, not as a hostess, but as a guest of honor. At the banquet, Leora sat beside him, wearing a tiara once crafted for Isolde's coronation. When the music stopped, Aldrich raised a golden cup and announced, let us toast to the bright future of Veldenreich, and to Lady Leora, the light of my court. The room clapped. Isolde did not. She stared at her sister, who met her eyes and smiled softly, like an apology that was never meant to be accepted. A queen's cage. She was still queen by title, but her power was gutted. Guards once loyal to her now answered only to the king. Her letters were censored, her visitors monitored. She dined alone, every night, in a chamber with no windows. And worse, every week. She was summoned to court to witness Leora's rise. The lady was now dressed in royal gold. She presented foreign gifts. She received petitions. She sat in the queen's chair when Isolde was not present. And yet Isolde was made to watch it all. Your presence affirms her legitimacy, Aldrich had said, smiling gently. It shows unity between sisters. But it wasn't unity, it was submission. The mirror and the blood. One night, Isolde found a note hidden beneath her wine goblet. It was unsigned, written in a rush. He plans to make her queen by the end of winter. Her hands shook. She had no army. No allies. No voice left in court. But she had memory. She knew the palace better than anyone. She knew its corridors, its fears, and most of all, she knew her sister's weakness. Because Leora had once whispered to her, as a child, I don't want power, I just want to be loved. And Isolde now realized, Leora was loved, but not safe, not from Aldrich, not from what would come next. A fire behind the eyes. That night, Isolde lit a candle. She looked into the brass mirror, cracked at the corner. She saw herself not as a queen, but as a woman who had lost everything except her rage. And rage is the one crown no one can take away. She began writing letters, not to nobles, but to enemies. She collected poison, not for Aldrich but for herself, in case she failed. And she waited, not for justice, not for mercy, but for the moment Leora would be named queen publicly. Because on that day, the kingdom would burn before Isolde bent her knee. A crown is not made of gold, it's made of eyes. Every glance that praises you sharpens its edge. Every whisper behind your back carves its weight deeper into your skull. Leora finally had what every royal mistress dreams of. The king's love, the court's applause, and a sister who had been silenced. Asterisk, but what she didn't know was that love, when stolen, comes with a curse. Asterisk, and the woman she stole it from was still breathing. The announcement, winter arrived, and with it came frost on the castle walls, and fire in the throne room. Asterisk, the king summoned the court to announce what everyone had already assumed. Asterisk, Lady Leora shall be crowned queen, consort, before the first snow thaws. Let her beauty and kindness be the face of Nobles clapped, priests nodded. Asterisk, and Isolda, seated in the shadows near the back, watched with a face made of stone. Asterisk, she stood, bowed, and walked out. Asterisk, everyone thought she had finally accepted her defeat. Asterisk, but in truth, that was the moment she declared war. The queen who refused to vanish. Asterisk, that night, Isolda met with 3 people who still owed her loyalty. Asterisk, a dismissed maid, an old palace scribe, and her former handmaiden now reduced to cleaning chamber pots. Asterisk, she didn't ask for swords, she asked for truth. Bring me court records, letters, anything the king signed in my name, anything Leora has touched. What she discovered wasn't scandal, it was evidence. Land titles changed, foreign gifts redirected, laws passed with forged seals. Leora wasn't just the king's mistress, she was the co-ruler illegally. And suddenly, Isolda had power. Asterisk, not in her hands, but in her silence. The gown and the fire. Asterisk, as the coronation day approached, Leora's innocence began to unravel. Asterisk, she visited Isolda secretly, wearing silk, wearing the tiara Isolda once wore. Asterisk, I never wanted this, Leora said. Asterisk, you left me no choice. Isolda said nothing. I don't want you hurt, Leora whispered. Asterisk, still silence. So Leora turned cold. Fine, if you hate me, then hate me, but the people love me now. Asterisk, that's when Isolda stood, walked toward the hearth, and held her hand briefly over the flame. She didn't flinch. Love, she said, is a fire, and you're not wearing gloves. The poison that was an asterisk. Rumors spread that Isolda had ordered poison from an Eastern merchant. She didn't deny it, but the vial she received was not for Aldrich, it was for Leora, but not to drink, to carry. During a late-night conversation, Isolda handed her the vial and said, Asterisk, drink this if the crown ever weighs too much. Leora didn't understand, but she took it trembling. Asterisk, and that fear was enough. The collapse of a king Aldrich grew restless. The crowds weren't cheering as loud. Priests began to question Leora's rise. Asterisk, whispers reached foreign courts, and then came the letter, a single scroll, unsigned, delivered to every noble house. There can be no new queen while the former one lives in silence, and if she speaks, the kingdom will rot in scandal. The king summoned Isolda privately. I know it's you, he said. Asterisk, you want to burn the palace down? She smiled for the first time in months. No, my king. You've already set the fire. I'm simply holding up a mirror. The sisters collapsed. Leora's coronation was delayed. Her gowns were returned. Asterisk, her tiara, hidden. She began to unravel. She stopped eating, stopped smiling. Once she tried to visit Isolda again, but found her door locked, not by guards, but by Isolda's choice. She had taken back control, and Leora now wore the very chains she had once helped forge the final banquet. Asterisk, one last feast was held, meant to silence the rumors. A show of unity. Leora and Isolda sat side by side. Asterisk, the king in the center. Candles flickered, wine flowed. And then came the moment. The king raised his cup. Asterisk, to peace among sisters, to the future. Leora looked at Isolda, her hands trembled. She drank, Isolda did not. Everyone watched the queen, and for once they all saw her again. The crown returned. Asterisk, Leora was never crowned. Asterisk, she disappeared from court weeks later, officially, to rest in the countryside. Asterisk, unofficially. Asterisk, she was sent away, broken, carrying the poison that had never been used. King Aldrich's power waned. Asterisk, and Queen Isolda, she was never officially reinstated, but her word became law. Her gaze feared, and when the next banquet came, she sat alone at the king's right hand. The sisterhood that never was. History called it a peaceful settlement. Asterisk, poets wrote about forgiveness between royal blood, but in truth, it was a war